Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Oh, Tony, it is as always because it's Michigan Monday, and you're not going to believe this, but Michigan played an overmatched opponent and won by pretty much exactly 30 points or so again, and gave up one score in the game again. Tony, do you remember the movie Groundhog Day?
Yeah, I do. But Tom, this was actually a little bit different because with this win, Michigan now improves to 1-4 against the spread on the season. So good job, Michigan, covering this game by plenty and doing so, I think, by the end of the second quarter. So at the first half there, 28-0 of their 45-7 win. This was a performance, and what we're going to talk about Michigan, we're going to talk about the rest of the nation as well in this, and talk about Ohio State as well. But this was as dominant as we've seen them, and they've been dominant all year long. They were more interested in being dominant in this one for a while, and then it's this it's the matter of factness, the coldness. The Nebraska was helping them a great deal, but Michigan does a great job of taking advantage of gifts that you give them, and the overmatched opponent that they are against Michigan. Michigan is like, that's right in our wheelhouse. This is right in the sweet spot. And this was another one. And 45-7, Nebraska was never in this. Michigan had one bad drive, 1 3-and-out. Other than that, they are moving the ball down the field, running it, throwing it well enough, making ridiculous catches, I'm sure we'll talk about. And yet it's still just 450 some yards of total offense. Like it's not, nothing blows you away, but at the end, it's just like, this was never a game. This was never in doubt. This was complete and utter domination. And Nebraska could have played this game 1,000 times and lost 1,010.
This did look like the most dominant performance we've seen from Michigan so far this year. And this is the best, probably, of the teams that Michigan has played so far this year. And I don't think that's a complete coincidence, because Michigan has, for long stretches in this first month, just looked bored. And it was just, they knew you could write a W on the schedule for Michigan for each of the first 4, probably 5 games in Sharpie, and you could have done it in January and not had any concern that you were going to have to figure out a way to get that W off the schedule and change it to an L. They were never in any danger in the first month. This was the first one where it was like, okay, this is a team that's theoretically has like an actual coach and some decent players, and okay, they're, it's not Rutgers, it's not Bowling Green. Okay, it's, I guess, theoretically kind of an interesting game. And Michigan came out and just went boom, 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 boom. And you mentioned the incredible catch. That was J.J. McCarthy to Roman Wilson. And it was pretty good coverage. It was not necessarily a great idea to throw it, but we talked last week about J.J. McCarthy and Roman Wilson seeming like they probably had gotten, kind of figured something out and had a pretty good connection, pretty good chemistry. And they just, J.J. McCarthy put it in a spot where only Roman Wilson and the back of the defender's helmet could catch it, and those two things stayed together, and they had a real fancy touchdown that everyone went, ooh, and you saw that on the highlights all day and all night. But it was just sort of very efficient, very effective, and they just sort of strangled the life out of Nebraska. And, I saw you on Saturday or Sunday tweeting out, information about how terrible the passing offenses Michigan has faced so far this year are. And I think that's useful context here, because I think we have, and we can get to what I tweeted over the weekend in response to that later in the show. I think anytime you say anything positive about Michigan, everyone wants to actually you about how, they haven't played anyone yet. It's like, yeah, we agree, we completely agree. And then if you want to say, well, Michigan hasn't played anyone yet, then everyone wants to, actually, they didn't play anyone last year, and then they beat Ohio State. So, and it's like, yeah, again, we agree. We all recognize the facts on the ground here, but, this is, there are things to learn from some of these games, whether they're good or competitive games or not. And so That's what we're here to do, is to discuss them and not necessarily take a side and make a, this is not Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless, oh, no, actually, Michigan's never won a football game. Like, that's not what we're here to do. We're here to, sometimes you're going to hear things you like. Sometimes you're going to hear things you don't like. That's okay. You're not actually a 3-year-old. You're allowed to do that. That's okay.
As long as you hear things, you're doing okay. I did like some of the responses to, Michigan not playing anybody. Then they're like, did you see what Bowling Green did to Georgia Tech? Like, I'm not sure that's the proper barometer we want to use. Also, the quarterback for Bowling Green against Georgia Tech was Connor Bazelak, who did not play against Michigan. Not that Bowling Green is any great shakes. I mean, they're 1-3 on the season against FBS opponents, and the one being the Georgia Tech.
And got annihilated at home last weekend by Ohio University.
Ohio actually beat them worse than Michigan did, 38-7 to 31-6. So, is Ohio better than Michigan?
Well, I mean, what I'm hearing is it's 2013 NCAA tournament, 2014 NCAA tournament, one of those all over again. I mean, I don't know what other conclusion you could possibly draw, Tony.
Well, let's draw some conclusions about Michigan's running game, because it's still 249 yards, and I can nitpick it if we want. We have talked about the influx of J.J. McCarthy running the ball, and projected that would happen, and it would make things look better and make things better, not just look better. They are better. And he did that rush 2 times for 30 yards, but a 21-yard touchdown, just using his legs, being involved. There was a carry early on, which on a read where you now know that he will do this. You have to recognize it. You have to pay attention to it. And so it is helping. It still hasn't necessarily opened up any big plays in the running game. Blake Corum, 16 carries for 74 yards, a long rush of 15 yards. Donovan Edwards, 14 for 48. Another just pedestrian outing by him, long carry of 9 yards. Kalel Mullings had a 20-yard touchdown run. He's playing more now. And I've seen people say maybe Blake Corum is banged up. If he is, I don't know why you run him 9 times in the first half of this game. Jim Harbaugh's had an interesting way of letting his players heal by using them on the field and running them, if that's the case, going back to last year with Blake Corum. But it looked like they were trying to get Donovan Edwards going in this one, and he was getting the ball early, and it's still just not happening. I went through and checked his success rate this week, 21.4%. Just 3 of his 14 carries met the success standards of 5 yards on 1st and 10, 70% of your yards on 2nd down, or all of your yards on 3rd or 4th down. Just 3 of his 14 carries. And it continues to be something that I can harp on, just because, it's better than saying, boy, these guys are really good again. Like, not that I'm trying to be critical, but we got to find something to talk about. And just the way he closed the season last year, the last 6 to 8 weeks, is so completely different than what we're seeing here. Although Michigan did bring out I think they've finally solidified their offensive line, so maybe things will pick up there. But overall, 249 yards, 4.9 yards a carry. You can't really criticize it, even though I just spent a couple minutes trying. And so much of this is the game was over at halfway through the 3rd quarter. They're putting Jack Tuttle, the backup quarterback, in. So at that point, everything is done. That's where you just stop the stat counting right there and analyze from there. Overall, I still want to see more explosion, but they're getting the job done, especially on short yardage.
Yeah, the rushing attack was what they needed it to be, and it feels like Blake Corum is what he has always been when he's been reasonably healthy, and they're moving. It's not incredible. He didn't rip off any crazy long runs. He didn't, it was just sort of efficient, and they kept the chains moving. It feels like they maybe have found something with Kalel Mullings in short yardage, in the way that Ohio State has maybe taken Chip Trainum, who maybe started the year as kind of the 3rd guy and then now might be the 2nd guy. It feels like Kalel Mullings might have kind of taken that role where he had a bunch of those kind of 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 carries for them. Just very efficiently, very effectively picked up first downs. They made it look very easy. He had the 20-yarder, as you mentioned, for the touchdown on one of them. it feels like they're doing what they need to be doing on the ground. And, he's I looked up, I don't know if you're familiar with, you probably, I'm sure, Tony, but I'm not sure if the listeners writ large are familiar with College Football Nerds. And they're one of the things they do is they measure how effective you are on a per play basis against your opponent compared to your opponent's averages. So if your opponents on average give up, let's just say 10 yards per pass attempt, and you throw for 12 yards per pass attempt against that same opponent, then you're 20% better than than average against them. Michigan in rushing offense this year on a per carry basis against their opposition, against the opposition has been weak, but the opposition has been weak when they've played other teams too. Michigan, has been third in rushing offense per carry against their opponents' averages. So they are among the best in the nation as far as being way ahead of what everyone else is doing against those same opponents. So that's a way to sort of adjust for opponent and also adjust for tempo. So it's like a per play thing, but it's also an opponent adjusted thing. And the rushing offense is third in the country in that. They're 13th in passing offense per attempt, opponent adjusted per play as well. So, I mean, the offense has been, they're in the 30s. They got into the 40s over the weekend against Nebraska, but, they have not put up the 81 points that Oregon put up in the one game, or, they're not putting up USC point totals, but they've been very effective on offense. I will, Tony, later there will be a quiz on where Michigan has not been up to standards and not even close to up to standards. We'll get to that a little bit later, but I just thought that was very interesting. Just for comparison's sake, Ohio State 45th in rushing, 16th in passing by those same metrics. Georgia, since we're going to be talking about Georgia later, 94th in rushing, 33rd in passing. So, Michigan is ahead of Ohio State in rushing, ahead of Ohio State slightly in passing there in that per play sort of opponent adjusted metric. So I just thought that was interesting context to this whole conversation.
There is plenty of context to go around in terms of who they've played and what they've done. One thing I will say about Jim Harbaugh, he is trying to get everybody a varsity letter this season. He is putting anybody out there. If you're on the team, if you got up in the morning and you made it to the stadium, you are going to see action. And I applaud him for that. He's getting everybody involved. Somebody would probably ask him hey, why aren't you stat padding? And he'd be like, what is stat padding? I'm not familiar with these two terms. What is this you're going to have to explain this to me, because that has no interest for him. He's not trying to, JJ McCarthy's Heisman campaign is not something that pops into his head or anything like that. It's just well, we've done this and now let's go and do the next thing. And just very robotic in a mean robot way, like an AI chasing Will Smith around type of way, not a robot Paulie's robot in Rocky 4 or whatever, or Rocky 3. These are dangerous robots. Not that Paulie's robot couldn't be dangerous. I mean, if that fell on you or ran over your toe or something like that. But let's talk about the Michigan defense and who they have faced this year, Tom, because I'm trying to figure out among these quarterbacks that they have faced this season, who has been the most impressive? Has it been Mason Garcia or Alex Flynn or Doug Brumfield or Jaden Mayava or Camden Orth or Hayden Timashek or Gavin Wimsett or Heinrich Harburg, who opened the season as a tight end? They have faced absolutely nobody in terms of the quarterbacking on their schedule. And that's the schedule they got, so that's what they're playing. But the 25 games that Michigan's opponents have played, the opposing quarterbacks, the quarterbacks that they faced have thrown for 200 yards in 2 games. So that of the 25 games, a quarterback that they have faced has thrown for 200 yards twice this year. Ohio State, they've faced 4 quarterbacks, 3 Power 5 or 3 FBS quarterbacks. Those guys have 11 200-yard passing games this year. One of them was against Ohio State. That was Austin Reed with Western Kentucky, throwing for 207. Sam Hartman didn't do it. But you look at comparatively who they have faced, And it gets interesting because Michigan, the quarterbacks that Michigan has faced, basically Michigan's pass efficiency defense right now is 108. And yet, like, if you remove the Michigan game from those quarterbacks, their pass efficiency of those quarterbacks is like 110.51. Like, there's very little difference between those quarterbacks playing their normal schedule and playing Michigan, which is a little concerning, other than the fact that Michigan continues to do what they're supposed to be doing. But it just gives you an idea of they're doing, Michigan's defense is doing against these quarterbacks what everybody else's defenses are doing against these quarterbacks. So that is a concern, maybe, compared to Ohio State. The quarterbacks that they've faced, their pass efficiency is 155.76. Now, when those quarterbacks face Ohio State, the efficiency drops down to like 104.2. So, like, there is a stark difference between everybody else for these quarterbacks when they face Ohio State, as opposed to there's literally no difference when these quarterbacks are facing Ohio versus Michigan.
Now, this is the numbers that I was giving you earlier on the opponent adjusted yards per play. So, you know, what teams do versus you versus everyone else they've played on their same schedule. Those line up very closely with what you just talked about. So Ohio State and Michigan both very good against the rush. Michigan 12th in per carry rushing. Ohio State 18th in per carry rushing. Pass defense, Tony. Hey, you're not going to believe this. Ohio State 8th in the country in per play opponent adjusted passing. Michigan 108th. That's what you're talking about there. Where you look at the top line numbers and it's like, yeah, well, they've held all these teams in like almost no passing yards, but everyone's held those teams to no passing yards because they're all terrible. So it's actually Michigan giving up that many passing yards per play. And like that's actually a little bit concerning. I strongly suspect they will not end up 108th in the country in passing defense per attempt and on a per play opponent adjusted basis. But if they're even half that, if they're 54th, like that's a little bit concerning because you're going to face a Penn State team that can throw the ball a little bit. You're going to face an Ohio State team that can throw the ball a little bit. You're going to face a Maryland team that can throw the ball a little bit. So, they're probably not going to look invincible forever this year. So, that's that. If you're looking for something to, it's not a worry right now, but it's just something to kind of keep an eye on. I think that's it. And right now, it's just kind of a question mark because they haven't faced anyone that can really stress them in that way. And they've been missing Will Johnson for a couple of the games. Yes, let's acknowledge that as well. But Rod Moore, yes. I mean, so you've had, there's a little bit of a reason, but you shouldn't need all of your starters to hold UNLV or East Carolina or Rutgers to, virtually nothing through the air. So that's just sort of something to keep an eye on. And just, again, we'll provide some context here with Georgia 56th in the country against the rush, and that same metric, 6th in the country against the pass. So Michigan's 100, literally 100 and then 102 spots behind Ohio State and Georgia right now in that, just in the passing, per pass, opponent adjusted compared to what they do against everyone else. So just something to sort of keep an eye on there if you're looking for something. If you're a Michigan fan who's like, I am uncomfortable with all of this success and do not care for it, you can feel free to at least be, mildly concerned, keeping an eye on the pass.
Yeah. Once you start tasting success, you should never be happy with any level of success other than a national title. Let me just reassure you. So I tweeted out those numbers on Sunday, that the quarterback numbers, and somebody responded, you got to take out the fourth quarter. Of course, we got to take out the fourth quarter. So in the first three quarters, Michigan's pass efficiency defense this year is 105.7. In the fourth quarter, 112.48. Like, very little difference in the first three quarters for them compared to what the quarterbacks against everybody else are. Now, first three quarters for Ohio State, 105.72, which is better than Michigan's 105.97. And then in the fourth quarter, Ohio State's even better, 99.24 passer rating. And I tweeted those numbers out, and there's some Michigan fans, telling me, oh, the transitive property, you're trying to spin things, you're going to say this. And like, this is this is literally just, I don't even know what numbers are going to come up. I'm just going to post the numbers, and this is what it is, because I was interested to see, because we've watched Michigan for 5 games now, and we have seen a collection of quarterbacks that are going to be going pro in something other than sports. Some may not even go pro in something other than anything. And no offense to those people. Some may just, hopefully, they have a family trust, something like that, because the quarterback play that we've seen, I guarantee you that there is not 5% of Michigan fans that, if I were to list all of these quarterbacks, the 9 or 10 that they have played, that 5% of them could get like 80% match on where everybody, the teams that, like Doug Brumfield. Tell me where he played. I'm not asking you, Tom, just the listeners out there. Please tell me where. And who, Mason Garcia, where might he have played? Like, this is a bit much.
Yeah, he was the guy with the mullet who played with South Carolina like 15 years ago, right? That's no, Steven Garcia. Shoot, no, not ringing any bells. I got to tell you, I have watched all of these games, and I was hearing some of those names and going, all right, Orth, I know, played for Bowling Green. Wait, which one was the East Carolina quarterback again? It is an anonymous parade of people who probably could not win the football throwing game at like a carnival. Like, it has been bad. And, Michigan has gotten slagged a lot for their schedule, and they kind of deserve it because they did bag out on the UCLA series. But, like, everyone kind of plays crappy teams this time of year. That's just sort of what you do. Michigan has just been blessed with a cornucopia of crap this year and last year as well. So you can't, it's not entirely on them, but it's also, it's also partly on them. And they have just looked so bored for such long stretches the first month of the season. And it was a little better on Saturday against Nebraska, at least in the first half. But again, Nebraska is not going to be one of the better Big Ten offenses they face this year. Rutgers, obviously not, just like Indiana was not for Ohio State. So, yeah, I mean, this is a Michigan team that I think we're 5 games into the season, and I don't think we've really learned anything materially about this Michigan team. Above and beyond, like you said, they probably have the offensive line more set now, and it feels like maybe they're sort of changing some of the roles in the running back rotation. But other than that, I don't know how much we've really learned any of it.
Well, and we'll learn much more this week at Minnesota against a Gopher team that sure lost to Northwestern, and sure had to, I think, come back against Louisiana Lafayette, but this will be the latest test against a quarterback who's not very good.
And just barely beat the Nebraska team that we just saw Michigan strangle into a million little pieces. Yeah. And, I think you talked about the response to your quarterback stats. And, I said on Twitter over the weekend that after watching Ohio State all season, it's remarkable how effortless Michigan makes converting 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1 look. And yeah, I mean, would you disagree with any of that, Tony?
No, Tom, I wouldn't. I'm sorry.
I got so much feedback about, well, they're not playing Notre Dame are they playing Notre Dame this week? No. Was Ohio State playing Notre Dame every week? No. Turns out Ohio State looked like crap trying to run the ball in short yardage against Youngstown State too. I mean, this is JJ McCarthy didn't throw 3 picks this week, but you see him throw 3 picks against Bowling Green. Like, yeah, that's non-responsive. That's not an actual answer to what I wrote about. Like, it's and it's okay. Like, we're allowed to say positive things about Michigan when Michigan does positive things, and we're allowed to say positive things about Ohio State when Ohio State does positive things. That doesn't mean that we're Michigan homers or Ohio State homers or anything else. It means like we're talking about what we see. There were people who were upset that Tony and I were talking about Michigan on Saturday. It's like, well, Ohio State's not playing. Who else do Ohio State fans care about if Ohio State's not playing? Because I would suggest the answer might be Michigan. And I don't know. I had someone suggest that we needed to join the Michigan beat, which, I mean, we could. I sold my house in Michigan about 15, 20 years ago at this point. So that would be a little bit inconvenient of a commute. But I mean, we could do that. But yeah, I don't. Tony, I guess I have questions about online discourse. And, why people in other realms of their lives would feel like they just need to get things spoon-fed to them that agree with everything they, all of their prior opinions. I'm not sure why they would feel like that. Anyway, as I've said before in other contexts, I'm just glad this isn't representative of society on the whole in a larger context.
Tom, with this feedback from the internet, have you ever thought that maybe you should just die?
I've considered that, and I will probably get around to that eventually. Right now, I'm too busy to do that. I don't have time, but I will eventually. My solemn promise to you is I will eventually probably get around to that. Yes.
You mentioned the short yardage, and I went through and checked that out for this game for Michigan. And while the game was still like in the first three quarters, when it was still a game, Michigan they finished 5 of 6 with Kalel Mullings and Blake Corum. And the one that they missed was 3rd and 3. Corum picks up 2 yards and then picks up the first down on 4th and 1. So it's like they got it in 2 attempts. So they pick up their short yardage. And I keep meaning to go back and look at all of Ohio State's over the course of these 4 games. And I should probably do that so I can get it done and then just continue to measure it from there rather than 7 games in. I don't feel like it. But the reaction from the internet, Tom, on Saturday when Michigan was going so well, I just tweeted out, is Michigan the best team in the country? And that was not the right thing to tweet out. That was.
How did that go with a fan base or a following largely made up of Ohio State fans? Did it go over well? I bet it went over well.
No, Tom, it didn't, because that is when I found out that, did you know, Tom, Michigan hasn't played anybody. So until they play somebody, you can't really know if they're any good.
I got to say, this is the first I'm hearing of any of this. And, it feels like if that was true, we would have acknowledged that at some point on this show or previous versions of this show, which I don't recall ever doing.
And I think that the main reason I asked that was because Georgia was losing at Auburn. And if Georgia is number 1 and Michigan is number 2, then, and I had many people saying, how can you even consider that? I'm like, well, they're already number 2. They're ranked number 2. And if we're talking about rankings, which, I just found out like 15 minutes before we started this show that 5 teams received first place votes in the AP. So even the voters are pretty torn on things. And Michigan now has 12 votes. Texas has 10 first place votes. I was just looking for some feedback and also maybe trying to, just choose some numbers. That's all, engagement. It's all, everybody loves engagement, but this is more of a reaction to Michigan playing well, Georgia playing well. But I think for me, if I'm ranking, I think the most deserving is Texas. And if we're talking about deserving versus, and I don't know if deserving is also best, like until I'm doing an AP vote, I'm not going to maybe put down what I think I would do because I don't want to be a hypocrite later on when I actually have to do it. But from what we've seen from Georgia and Michigan at this point, I don't think either one of them deserve to be number 1, but also the performances of the respective performances of those 2 teams. I think it is a legit question because this is the best we've seen Michigan look in a long time. And it took, not that it caught me by surprise, but it made me take notice.
I will let you know. Here's a little context to this whole conversation. While you were talking and I Googled AP college football top 25, the link that came up was blue because I had not clicked on it in however many months that was. So if that gives you any indication how closely I'm paying attention to the polls this time of year. Georgia 1, they've got 35 first place votes, Michigan 2 with 12, Texas 3 with 10, Ohio State 4 with 1, Florida State 5th with 4. Honestly, of all the stuff on here, Penn State 6, Washington 7, Oregon 8, USC 9, Notre Dame 10. I think, honestly, the thing that I'm most surprised about on any of this is that Washington has 0 first place votes. Like Washington, there are lots of ways you can do your vote. And I vote number 1 is whoever won the national championship last year, and then I don't move them down until they lose. That is the argument for Georgia with 35 first place votes, because they've looked like crap and also not really played anyone. So Michigan has been also not playing anyone, but looked slightly better than Georgia has. Texas has the best win of the season, probably, going on the road and beating Alabama. Ohio State has a very good win going on the road and beating Notre Dame. Florida State has a couple good wins. They beat LSU. They beat Clemson. I think there's an argument for them. Washington, though, has, they have not played a murderer's row here, and they looked bad at Arizona. on Saturday. But they beat Boise State, they beat Tulsa easily, they killed Michigan State, they beat Cal, they beat Arizona. I mean, there's not a signature win there because Boise State. You're thinking Boise State, they're really good. Not no more, they ain't. But they're that I think we'll find out more about Washington in 2 weeks when they play Oregon. I think there's a decent argument for the Washington-Oregon winner should be number one in a couple weeks. That's a possibility. Yeah, Georgia, I can't really make a compelling argument for Georgia other than, well, they haven't lost a football game in 2.5 years, something like that. I mean, what else is the case for having Georgia number one?
That's it. And it's just like, well, we know Georgia is the best. Meanwhile, they've been in one-score games in the fourth quarter against South Carolina and Auburn, two teams who have a combined 500 record at this point. So, yes, championship teams win close games, but that shouldn't quote unquote, earn you a top spot in the rankings. And again, we talk about the rankings with such disdain. Why don't we talk about the Heisman next? But I will say Oklahoma being 5-0 and down at number 12 is pretty crazy because they're blowing everybody out. They had a close-ish game, like a 15-point game against a not so great opponent, but they play Texas this week. So if they win that, maybe they'll move into the top 10. We'll see. But overall, Alabama's still in there. I do wonder, Tom, what is the scenario? We were asked in a listener questions episode last week. What is the scenario where a one-loss Ohio State team misses the playoffs? I think it is possible if a two-loss LSU wins the SEC West and then beats Georgia in the SEC championship game, and every other conference champ is a one-loss or undefeated, you cannot put an SEC team in the playoffs in that scenario. You cannot put a two-loss SEC champ in over one-loss champs from any of the other conferences, because those other conferences are going to have some decent wins. This is presuming Florida State goes undefeated.
Well, and I was just scrolling down the rankings, and I'm going to disagree with you on the Oklahoma at 12 being the most shocking thing in there. Can I talk you into number 23 LSU, who got their doors blown off by Florida State? Gave up 55 points to Ole Miss last weekend in a loss. Has their signature win against an FBS team this year is 41-14 against Mississippi State. They also beat an absolutely terrible Arkansas team by 3 at home, and then a big win over Grambling. So, I mean, incredible quality there on that schedule. Definitely deserving of a spot in the top 25. Tennessee also in that conversation. Boy, Tennessee. The loss to Florida, just aging better and better, like a fine wine. I mean, Tony, they beat Virginia, they beat Austin Peay, they beat UTSA, and they beat South Carolina, and only lost by 13 points against a Florida team that has gotten murdered by a quarterbackless Utah and got murdered by, who did they lose to last weekend? It was someone terrible. Kentucky. Yeah, Kentucky. Got murdered by Kentucky. I mean, and then, listen, if you've got a 13-point, that's a very competitive 13-point loss to a team that lost to Kentucky and Utah, Tony. So, I mean, you say that they can't let a two-loss SEC champion in over a one-loss, but where do I always tell you to look, Tony, when we're talking about the college football playoff committee and what they want to do? Well, you look at the bottom of the polls. I feel like you can look at the bottom of the AP poll right now and go, well, I mean, Tony, they're in the SEC. How bad could they be?
Kentucky right now, 5-0, ranked 20. If they go to Georgia this weekend and win, you'll see the highest rise of the 20th ranked team in the history of college football, because they will jump to the top 5 and maybe the top 3 because, I mean.
Can I run you through Kentucky's murderer's row that they've played so far? Ball State, Eastern Kentucky, which of all the directional Kentuckys is one of them, Akron. They won at Vanderbilt. That's a quality SEC road win, Tony. And then Florida, who again, I mean, was almost competitive against a Utah team that almost has an offense. So, I mean, listen, you've got to respect it. Here's the great thing. Someone's going to win those games. And if Georgia beats Kentucky, well, I mean, they beat a 5-0 ranked team, Tony. And if Kentucky's not enough to get you excited, Can I interest you in an unbeaten Mizzou? I mean,
no. Ooh.
They have wide receivers, Tony. I mean, I'm not sure if you've heard. They have wide receivers, so yeah. I mean, it is an incredibly deep and talented SEC. Kentucky has to play Georgia and Missouri back to back. They have Missouri at home, so and this weekend Missouri hosting LSU. So man, just the SEC heavyweight slugfest we are in for. Boy, can't wait.
Could you interest me in Missouri? No. I couldn't possibly. No. Oh.
Show me? No, thank you. More like the no thank you state, if you ask me.
So there you have it, Tom. Any other rants that you want to go on and anger people on social media? Please, by all means.
No, I'm just going to be turning off my notifications, and we'll be back with a different show, I'm sure, tomorrow of some kind.
We will. So want to thank you all for tuning in. As always, please find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Become a member there. Support us that way if you would like. Also, continue to find us at YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle, Facebook.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Wherever you can find us, go ahead and find us. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.